Hi folks, Sean Bradford here, the designer of Cypherpunk Board Game. And I want to give you a quick update. I know it's been a while since I've sort of updated everyone, and I figured showing you via video would be the best way to sort of demonstrate the things I've been working on. If you have played Cypherpunk before, maybe you've seen some other videos, updates that I've done, you'll notice that there's been a great deal of changes. And this is mainly due to the fact that we now have a physical prototype of Cypherpunk that I've been able to play. I haven't got too much photography of that because as soon as we got this physical prototype and we played, I immediately noticed things that need to be changed. That's the purpose of a physical prototype, is that when you actually table it, you're able to work out that, well, this text is way too small, these boards are too big, this takes too much table space. So I've been able to make a lot of changes just from as soon as I opened it, tabling it, understanding how things work, how fiddly some things are. So this current version is the version that I've now produced after playtesting the physical version, which will now need to be printed again. So I'm essentially now going to be opening up another round of playtesting to print another physical prototype. Well, I don't think I'll need to reprint the entire thing, but I'll certainly need to make several adjustments and changes. So here in Tabletop Simulator, you can see maybe the biggest change is actually the board itself. I've put a lot more on one single board, and this is ready to save table space. Previous versions had different boards, and these player boards were much bigger, so you notice that the player boards here are much smaller as well. But really just trying to keep everything into one place. We have the black market up here, we have the surveillance resistance track here, round track here, and then we have the different sections where you can put tokens and different things for the game. The player boards, you'll notice, are a lot smaller. So, and you'll also notice that I've added 4 new playable characters. So we now have a lot more range of people to play. We also have female characters, which we didn't have before. Again, these are aliases. So in the game, you are hiding your identity. So you take on one of these aliases to, fight this surveillance regime. And we've also changed how metadata works. So for example, if I was to take this character, and these are my ability cards. So let's throw this here. This is my Monero. This character has 6 movement. So if I just explain how movement now works as well. So in the game, you would obviously draw a surveillance card. And these surveillance cards are now double-sided as well. So we've got double the location scrambling of on these cards. And they're also different colors, just so that if you accidentally flip it, you sort of know what color you were on. So here you have your location, and you also have your keyword card. So the keywords I have amended just to make it a little bit easier to work out what's happening here, so you can see that it's just kind of easier to separate. So for example, let's just say that this card gave us 3 surveillance resistance. So we then pop 3 surveillance resistance on the board, like so. I'm going to quickly show you. And then this character has 6 movement. So if we were to just throw our movement here, now what we do is we only use 1 cube for movement. Previously we used 2 cubes. So now you'd move your 6 movement. As you move, you then take surveillance resistance from this board and you throw it in your last movement space. So essentially what happens now is the more you move, the more surveillance resistance you're going to burn through. And this prevents people maybe lollygagging. It means that your movement actually has consequence. It also means if you choose to upgrade your movement, it's gonna also save, and it's going to protect you from leaking as much surveillance resistance. So you're just going to be able to go further. Now on the back of these player cards, we also have now a description that also outlines their sort of a bit of a bio here. This is like a first player tip of how to play the character, some advice. We also have this kind of handy stat between attack, defense, and utility. This is your sort of special item that you should keep an eye out for. And then we have a little quote from this character as well. And this is a quick way to sort of work out in terms of the stats here, if you want to play a character that is maybe a bit more aggressive, or a character that is a bit more defensive, or a character that has more utility involved. So that could be a great way, just in terms of first starting out, knowing how to play like a character kind of gives you some guidance for a first-time player. But then also if you want to select a certain character that has a certain build that is kind of more to your play style that you want to actually adapt. So another thing in terms of the player boards being changed, the abilities are now separate cards, and this is really to save table space. So now you would leak metadata and you would throw it on this card. You then would draw the card and you would discard the excess metadata. You discard this and then you'd flip this over. So this does a couple of things, is that it actually allows us to not be confined to the board itself, to have abilities. So I was able to add an extra ability. So now all characters, instead of having 3 abilities, now have 4 abilities. So they've all been granted new abilities. And then it also adds a bit of randomness in terms of which abilities you access. So I think this stops the sort of cognitive load early on in the game when you're trying to work out, what am I supposed to do? Now you don't have to think as much about which ability you're going to unlock. You just unlock ability and you get a random ability. And this means that you can then generally adapt your playstyle depending on what abilities you are unlocking at this time. So we're trying to reduce the amount of cognitive load when you're first playing. So now when you play and let's say you leak metadata, you already have 3 options. You can either put it on your movement so you go faster, you either put on ability to get increased attacks or increased defenses, or you can put it on the surveillance resistance board, which then defends the entire team. So you basically have 3 options. Whereas before, I found that if you were also trying to work out which abilities to put it on, it just kind of slowed down the process. So I think this is a good move moving forward. Another thing is that we only have 2 stages now. So there's 2 forms of encryption. Previously there was 3. Through playtesting, 2 just seems like a better fit. We might even reduce this to 1. But right now I'm sort of happy with 2. So we have a simpler version of encryption, which doesn't give you as much surveillance resistance. And then as the game progresses and you kind of take more damage, the surveillance standard, the encryption standard improves, and there's a different method of encryption known as a one-time pad, and that gives you an enhanced encryption resistance. So I like this thematically, but we might just revert to just one encryption standard. But another thing, having different stages, is that the goal is to eventually have different modules where we have different encryption methods. So we could introduce the Playfair cipher or a CISO cipher. We can have different types of ciphers for the game at different stages, and that could be little add-ons that people can get and kind of change the game or enhance the game as they please. One thing we did with items here as well is that we just made these values larger, so they're just easier to see. This was one thing when playtesting. A lot of the kind of buying and selling values were quite small, and they're very difficult to see at a distance. So that has now been rectified. It's going to be a lot easier to see things on the board. And then another change of the board is safe houses. So we now have these areas where if you land in this space, you then can, or even though you're inside the Babylon, the city, this space considers you outside the city, which means you can sell. Whilst previously the only places where you could sell items were outside. But there's a catch to safe houses, that they have a one-time use. So when you use a safe house, there's a little marker of some sort that will go here that just lets you know the safe house has now been compromised. You'll have to go to a different safe house. It also adds another layer of complexity because we can add objectives, or we can add special abilities that kind of interact with safe houses. And as you can see, there's some that are sort of spotted around the board. And these were places I found that people didn't have too much of a reason to ever go to. Like no one really had too much of a reason to come down here. Well, now you do because there's a safe house. Or there wasn't too much reason to be in this area. Now you do, there's a safe house. So it's a way to kind of utilize more of the board, add an interesting mechanic, and then just do some great stuff with that. Here in the black market, so let's say that once we get all these items in the black market, and as you go to different stages, let's say that these certain things have been removed and people can still get these items. These empty slots now increase the buying and the selling of the items. So for example, here we've got these 2 slots empty. This red meat would then sell for 4 Monero, and it would sell for 6 Monero. This mechanic just symbolizes an expanding and shrinking economy. So as items become rarer, they become more expensive, but they also sell for higher amounts. So there's a bit of strategy here in terms of when you should buy, when you should sell. Maybe you should hold on to your item, wait till the market conditions change so you can sell. So it adds a little bit more of a dynamic market, feels a bit more real. And that was the goal of this. And it plays really well, works really well. So I'm really happy with that change. So yeah, as you can see, there's been a good couple of changes here. And you're welcome to playtest this. I'm going to be starting Saturday playtestings at 10 a.m. CST every week again. because now the real goal here is to try and lock down a lot of the balancing issues. So we've introduced a lot more abilities, new characters, and a lot of these characters and abilities need to be play tested now. I've also added new surveillance cards that have different effects. A lot of these things will need to be play tested to see, do they work, do they make sense. And then once I'm sort of happy that this is at a point where it's a bit more locked in, again I'll reprint it, and then I'll start doing physical play testing again. But slowly and surely we're seeing improvements. This is feeling more and more like an actual game now, which I think is it has come along greatly. Oh yeah, one final thing I forgot to mention here on these player boards, we've now introduced a mechanic called increased hash rate and then economic warfare. And this is just a way for people to get Monero that doesn't involve selling items. So now there's two ways to get Monero. You can either sell items through the black market, or you can mine. So you can we did have a mining mechanism in the game previously, but this sort of just makes it a bit more robust. And it works very much like how mining works in the real world, where you pay money to run electricity, which then increases your hash rate, which then increases your probability of actually finding a block and mining it. So it works in a very similar way as the real Monero mining works. And then we have economic warfare, which is just a mechanic which allows you to share Monero with other players. So some players have better starting Monero than others. They might have better items that they sell a bit of time, but it sort of allows players now to have a way to share their XMR, their Monero with other players, and it creates a bit more sort of collaboration between players. Well, we didn't have that mechanism really in the past. So one other thing we'll notice is that these boards are now different. So in the game, as you take damage, you then start to reveal elements of your metadata. So you see in this case, we now revealed the eye. In this case, we would draw and then play a surveillance card straight away. So it adds another sort of layer of danger. You don't know what you pull. Are you going to potentially pull a surveillance card? And then also it kind of prevents you from knowing what exactly you're pulling, and you want to make sure you don't try to pull your any sort of identifier. Because the game ends once a certain identifier of yours is exposed, whether it's your IP or whether it's your address or your name, date of birth, or your MAC address. So this, by having different metadata plates, it makes it harder to sort of know what you're doing. It kind of increases the risk of pulling the metadata. So if you want to play test this, we're running sessions at 10 a.m. CST every Saturday. You can also just boot up Tabletop Simulator yourself and give this a go. I do have a little player aid here that you can see. There's two sides, and that kind of gives you the turn order. So if you're unsure what to do, put the turn order here. But if you have any questions, then just reach out to me. Again, we're playing 10 a.m. CST every Saturday, so that's a great time to just play with me, and that's a great way to learn the game as well. And then finally, when I'm not working on Cypherpunk directly, whether it's designing cards or playtesting, I am reading books about cryptography, about the history of cryptography. And some of the books I've been reading, which I think you might find interesting, is this book by Richard Aldrich, GCHQ, which sort of outlines the partnership between the United States signals intelligence and the British signals intelligence around World War II, post-World War II. So this was a fascinating read. So I've got a lot out of that. And then I've got these three books, which have been very, very insightful. They're all by Julian Whitehead, who was a sort of ex-intelligence officer for the British. And they just outline the ciphers and intelligence used during the British Civil War and afterwards, which I find is a very, this is sort of the time period in which some of these avatars have been inspired by. And currently I'm going through Michael Collins' sort of biography here. Michael Collins was, obviously a famous guerrilla warfare operative, fought against the British, inspired a lot of different guerrilla groups doing guerrilla warfare in an urban environment, which is what this game is based on. So I figured that would be a good book to read. So reading lots of different stuff, whether it's British history, Irish history, signals intelligence in the US, signals intelligence in the UK. But I think it's important in building a world that feels cohesive. And this is really a game about a world. It's about a dystopian world in which you are in and you're using encryption to fight. So I've really taken a lot of emphasis on the cipher and the punk elements. So you're using ciphers and you're a punk. You're fighting against an establishment that's oppressing the people. So all that to say that I am, even when I'm not directly working on the game, I am indirectly working on it by reading books and researching. I've got a notebook which I use. I write down a bunch of information of things which might make great game concepts or great mechanical game ideas. Obviously, the game has a lot of keywords, and I want all of these keywords to be linked to ciphers to some degree. And there's also a little, in these sort of keypads on the back, there's a little blurb here which outlines the sort of the flavor text on the left, bottom left, outlines sort of historical significance of these words. So I want everything to feel like it belongs in this world, in this game. It's referencing something to do with cryptography. So there's a bit of a little history tidbits here and there in the game. So guys, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. Check out the links in the description if you want to find out how to connect with me. We also have a Simple X group, so at any time just ask questions there. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can, but this is slow and steady. This is going to take a while to develop. Once it is developed, we can move it's really full steam ahead, but I do want to make sure that this is a bit more polished before I start taking it out and I do another prototype. Prototypes are expensive, so I want to make sure that there's another round of digital playtesting before making physical playtesting, and then I'll go back to conventions or meet up with different board game groups and play test it physically, and then again refine the process. But I think each step seems to be like a quantum leap. It's not like, oh, this is it really at this point. I think it's minor changes rather than sort of foundational changes, which it has been in the past, which has taken a while to bring about these changes. I think moving forward, it's going to be a lot of minor tweaks and adjustments in terms of tweaking things here and there in terms of balancing, so the game just feels a bit more cohesive. But I ultimately would like to bring this to Kickstarter as soon as possible. Hopefully next year, some point, probably in the spring or in the summer. I want to keep you posted on every step of development. Again, this is also your project, so feel free to offer any suggestions in terms of themes or in terms of mechanics or anything you'd like to see. I'm all ears. So really hope that this is something that you can be involved in as well. Thank you for your attention. Ciao.